Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we're going to be looking at how my two antweights did at ARC's December meet. So today we had This Is a Party, my 150 gram vertical spinner, and a little obvious, my 150 gram angled bar spinner, both competing at ARC's December meet. So before we kind of kick off, I'm just going to put a bit of a quick little close-up video on screen here just to show some of the changes that I made to This Is a Party. So This Is a Party has a brand new motor mount now. This one is carbon fiber, so it's not going to break like the last one did. It also has two roll hoops rather than one roll hoop so that it's more stable when it's upside down, and hopefully I can use that to right myself a little bit better. And then a little obvious has had no changes. Literally nothing has been done to a little obvious. It was just ready to go as soon as we were out of the last competition. It's been kicking butt, and I didn't really need to do anything to it at all. So let us get into the fights. So This Is a Party is going into the A-League, 1v1 A-League, and a little obvious is going into 2v2 teams with Scorpion, which is the robot made by Raptor Robotics, and Jaden, who is my usual teammate for these 2v2 type things. So first up we have a fight with This Is a Party, and we're going up against Reaper, which is a dustpan grabbing robot, which is a robot that I've designed before, or a type of robot I've designed before, and I know they can be quite effective, but I was kind of hoping going into this one we'd be able to spin the weapon up and chip away at the bottom of his dustpan lid, or dustpan edge, so we would get in underneath him and we wouldn't have to worry too much about it. So let's take a look at how that goes. So that was bad news, and bad news in one really big way. My weapon didn't spin up, and I think what that's down to is the fact that I did not touch the electronics in This Is a Party between months, and there must have been some hit in the finals of last month that actually pulled a wire out of the actual motor itself, or at least disconnected it enough to make the motor stop working properly, which meant that, of course, I didn't have a weapon and it came down to a pushing fight, and we were kind of evenly matched for the most part. He couldn't really do anything to me because he wasn't long enough to scoop me all the way up, which meant I always had a wheel on the ground, and I didn't really have the pushing force to push back at him. And obviously I'm not used to driving as a pusher because it's a spinner. It's not supposed to be a pushy robot. So that one did come down to a draw at the end of the day there, which was a little bit unfortunate, and it also meant that I had to do a very, very quick change. I, of course, had not brought a spare motor because why would I do that? So we actually got a motor out of Shrapnel, or Chris's builder, Shrapnel. This one was actually a spare old motor that he had lying in a tub. And that is going to be important in a little bit when we talk about This Is a Party's next fight. However, we are now going to go across to the 2v2s, and that is going to be these 2v2s versus Tron and Tron Legacy, both of which are overhead grabber style robots. These aren't dustpans though, these are more flipper style wedges with an overhand grabber. So let's take a look at how this goes. So that that is the most damage I've done in a fight and then lost the fight. So that was kind of crazy. We took so many pieces off both of those Trons, the Tron and the Tron Legacy, and we still ended up losing the fight. Obviously, part of that was because my wheels came off, so I was kind of wandering around on one wheel, which is never a good spot to be in a fight like this. So consequently, I then hot glued the wheels onto the hubs, which is something I normally do, but I'd forgotten to do on This Is a Party. Obviously, I thought I'd done that for previous months, but hadn't So the wheels were vulnerable to falling off, which is a thing that happened. And then of course there was that nice little effect right there at the end where he pushed me up into the corner and I got up and gyroed up like that, which meant that I could really only go forwards and backwards on the one wheel with the gyro forces keeping me in the air. And yeah, I didn't play that very well. I really should have spun the weapon back down and flopped back onto my front or my back. But if I'd fallen forwards, then it would have been all over anyway. So there wasn't a whole lot we were going to be able to do about that one. Yeah, it was just one of those type of fights. If I had my wheels on, it would have been a very different fight indeed. We did get a lot of damage in there though, and the robot's working pretty well from what you just saw. I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, we're now going to move back over to the A-League, and we're now going to have This Is a Party versus Antimatter. Now, for those of you who have watched the past couple of these fight videos, Antimatter is a really, really good, really low wedge that I did manage to beat last time simply by pushing him around a little bit. Basically, the shapes of our robots meant that when he was trying to push me, I did have a good bit of pushback against him, and I really wasn't getting the weapon grip on him. I wasn't doing any damage, I was basically just having to try and push him around. So let's see how this fight goes. So that did not go very well. The new motor wasn't really spinning up. It was kind of getting up to about half speed and then kind of like spinning once or twice and then would stop and then spin once or twice and stop. I found out right at the very end of the fight that what I needed to do was to sit the weapon on 25% throttle and leave it there for about a second, maybe two, and then I could throttle up. But I found that out way, way, way too late. In fact, I found that out after the clip that you saw finished. It was as I was pulling the robot, or as I was about to pull the robot out of the arena, I figured that out just by messing around with the sticks before I pulled the robot out. So that didn't go very well either. However, we did get the win in this case. It did come down to a pushing battle again, which is not exactly where I want to be with this robot, because of course it has a good weapon on it when the weapon works. But that was just the way it happened. And admittedly, that might actually be the way I have to play it against Antimatter. Their wedge is just so low that I can never get any good engagement with my weapon because I can't ever get in underneath them. So maybe every Antimatter fight is just going to have to come down to a pushing match because I don't think there's anything else I can do with them. Yeah, we'll see how we go with all of that. So the next fight up is going to be Simple Blue and Reaper in the 2v2. So Reaper was one of the robots that was being fought in both A's and 2v2s. I did this myself a little while ago, but I now avoid doing that where at all possible, mostly because people like me have spinning weapons in the 2v2s, and if you go out in one, you're going to go out in both, basically. So this is a clamping overhead robot and just a nice chunky wedge robot. Let's take a look at how this goes. So that didn't go according to plan. That is a loss. So that means we're sitting at 2 losses in the 2v2s. We're not doing too well at this point in time. Those two were an interesting matchup for us. They just had interesting geometry, and I was having a really hard time getting the weapon to make any proper decent contact with them. With Reaper, he was having a good time getting in underneath me, which meant that the weapon couldn't contact. And then Simply Blue or Simple Blue, they had a good shape that wasn't allowing my weapon to get any bite, and that really meant what I was doing was just kind of like skinning layers of plastic off of their 3D print, but never getting a good enough bite to throw him across the arena or actually do any really significant damage. So that was a little bit disappointing, but that's just the way this one has gone so far with the 2v2s. Hopefully we can pick that up in some future 2v2s. Now we're going to move back over to the A-League. So next up we have the A-League fight of This Is a Party versus Bladetip. Now Bladetip is another robot that if you guys have been watching my channels for a little while, you've seen a lot before. It is driven by Owen, who is one of our youngest competitors in the A-League, and he is a really good driver. So he's got titanium blades all over his robot that are designed to kind of get into weapons and jam things up, or get into wheels and jam them up. And I have nice shapes on my wheels that he can stick his prongs into. So let's take a look at how this fight goes. Goal! I got a hole in one! That was probably one of the best fights that This Is a Party has ever had. This weapon motor was bad, and it was bad through that entire fight. I was having to do what I mentioned before with the stick throttling to get it all to work, but when I was getting the weapon up to full speed, those hits were great. It was doing a really, really good job. It was throwing Bladetip here, there, and everywhere around the arena, and of course, the icing on the cake there was that hole-in-one shot where we managed to hit him with the weapon and bounce him across into the pit in one go. That was awesome. That was just, I loved that fight. That was great. And it was good to see that the weapon was actually up and running and working properly this time. I mean, I still had to like feather the throttle and stuff to get it there, but at least I had a spinning weapon for a fight like that. So we're going to stick with the A-League now, and we're going to continue on with a fight versus Sawblade, and it is a robot made out of paint scrapers, sorry, Sawtooth. It is a robot made out of paint scrapers with a Dremel blade on a brushless motor right at the front of it. It is also a bit of a weird shape, so we're going to have to see how this fight goes. So we won that one. He actually ended up stopping at the end there. He was right up close to the pit, and as you could see, I didn't actually push him down the pit. I also turned my motor off because when he kind of landed in that heap over by the pit, he just straight up told me that he was dead. So I decided to leave enough alone and just leave him there and let him be counted out, which is what happened. So that was a pretty good fight. Of course, we broke the saw blade that he had attached to it. We actually also broke the weapon motor that was in underneath that saw blade. But yeah, on the whole, that was a good fight. Once again, it was a case of having that weapon up to speed and you know, me having to throttle the throttle up there to get it there. So that's the thing. When the weapon works, this guy works really, really well. I just needed to have the actual, like, my own weapon motor from here at home in the robot, but it didn't happen. I'm making do though. I've got a couple of wins now, so that is going pretty well. So next up we have the 2v2s again, and this time we are going up against Brunhilde and Forcey, and this is a robot by Steve and also by his son Owen. So Owen we fought earlier in the A's, and Steve is his father, who also has a robot in the A's. And they have a pretty interesting setup here. So they've got one wedge robot and one undercutter robot that is actually inspired by Valkyrie. It's a pretty cool robot. So let's take a look at this fight. So that actually went pretty well. They're kind of hard shapes to get a hit on as well. After I had after I'd hit Brunhilde's weapon a couple of times, it kind of stopped working, and I was then left with not a lot to grab onto. Brunhilde is an interesting shaped robot, and its foam wheels are really hard for me to get any purchase on. I was hitting them constantly, but nothing really happened to them. There's a couple of nicks out of the foam, but that's about it. So it kind of says something for those foam wheels. They held up really, really well under a lot of pressure from my weapon. But obviously, as you saw in that one, Jaden, my 2v2 partner, kind of took the reins and just mopped the floor with them. He did a lot more in this fight than I did. So we're now going to move back over to the A-League, and this is a party, and we're going to go up against Rino, which is the spring-powered flipper at ARC. Oh man, this is a party does the thing, and it actually does. It will sit at a weird angle and just stay there. This shouldn't be an issue, or wouldn't be an issue, if I had the right motor in place, because the motor should have enough torque to give it a kick and let it come back down. But as it stands, with this motor that was graciously donated to me, it doesn't have the torque it needs to kick itself back over again. which meant that that was a really easy win for him, and yeah, quite a disappointing loss for me. So with that though, we do go into the semi-finals for the A's. There are still a couple of 2v2 fights to go, but the semi-finals happen now, then there's a couple of 2v2 fights, and then we'll get on to the finals if we get that far. So in the semi-finals, because I lost enough in my group bracket, I was second in my group bracket, which meant I was facing first from the other group bracket, and that meant Shrapnel. So those of you who have watched any ARC videos before know Shrapnel. Shrapnel is a very devastating horizontal spinner. He knocked me out of nationals, antweight nationals, over in Brisbane earlier this year, and he's just always a difficult one to fight against. So let's take a look at that. And it's the return of the thing. The issue with This Is a Party's design is these underhangs on the front pods here give a good spot for horizontal spinners to hit in and flick me up and over, which is exactly what happened in that scenario. Now the other problem there, as you saw, as I was upside down, I was like hitting the motor and it was vibrating the robot a little bit, and I managed to get it to the wall. The problem was, as I was panicking, I should have had the robot's wheels pushing the other way to what I did. So when it hit the wall, it was pushing up, so it kind of pushed back up onto the nose a little more, like rocked forwards, and that wasn't ever going to go anywhere. What I really needed to do was spin the wheels so that it ran down the wall that way, and it would have been back kind of into this type of position, and then we might have had a shot of actually getting back into the fight from there. But as it currently stands, or as it stood in that fight, I was panicking, I had the wheels going the wrong way, and I paid the price for it. I got counted out, and that was that, basically. So next up, we're going over to a 2v2 fight. As I said, we are now going up against Smasher and Scraper. So Scraper is built by the same guy that built Sawtooth that we saw earlier on, and it is basically also made completely out of paint scraper blades. And then Smasher is a brushless hammer bot built by Steve and run by his youngest son, and he loves to dance with his robots. He'll always spin around and dance and whack his hammer around. He's not particularly effective, but I honestly think he has the most fun out of anybody at the competition. So let's take a look at how this fight goes. So that was kind of a fun fight, actually. You should have seen there, Jaden went over and danced with Nathan, who was driving Smasher. That was good fun. I did like the fact that he did that. He left me to do some of the work, and he went over and did his little dance over there. That was kind of funny. We also did lose the wheels again on A Little Obvious. I put more hot glue on them between this one and the next fight. Speaking of the next fight, we are now going up against Antimatter and Simple Solution. Simple Solution is designed to be a horizontal spinner killer. It has a bar out the front of it, which is made of brass and all very solidly connected to the frame. So the idea is that a spinner hits that and breaks the spinner or breaks the motor that is running the spinner rather than breaking Simple Solution. And it's also Antimatter, who, as we've seen already, is a really good pusher with a really low wedge. So let's take a look at that. Man, did I get lucky in that fight. There are a couple of times in that fight where I was almost in the pits. There was a couple of times in that fight where I was upside down, barely had a wheel on the ground, and was basically just running completely off of brushless motor power to keep myself in place or moving away from the pit. I ended up doing a lot of work in that fight. Jaden went down the pit pretty early. But that is the way 2v2s go. He had one where he was pulling most of the weight, and I had one where I was pulling most of the weight. Honestly, at a point there, it really didn't seem like I was going to win that. I was on my own against two of them. I did manage to take out Antimatter's wheel relatively early, which is nice. I do like doing that if I can in a fight against Antimatter, because as I said, he's that nice low wedge and he's really strong as a control bot. So you know, usually he's a pretty formidable opponent, and being able to hit his wheels at the back and move the silicon off them, or move the rubber off them, is a good advantage in a fight if you can do it. And as I said, I've been lucky a couple of times now and managed to do that, which has, yeah, it has its advantages, as I said. So that was a good win. And with that win, it actually means that we have third place for the 2v2s. We had a very, very rocky start for the 2v2s early in the day, and so it was only by the skin of our teeth that we managed to make it into third place. But there you go, that is what we did. So now we're going to move back over to the final fight of the day. This was the third place playoff for This Is a Party, because obviously we're in the semi-finals and we lost that to Shrapnel. So now we have a third place playoff and we're going up against Reaper. And so this is basically starting or ending the day where we started the day, fighting against Reaper. But this time we have a weapon. Sure, I need to feather the throttle to get the weapon to spin up, but this time we've got a weapon. So that was basically a one-hit KO. I mean, I had to get the weapon up to speed and we kind of dodged around each other a little bit, but then it was one hit, he was up and over and could not self-right from that position and wasn't able to drive all that well from that position. I think that chrome hand of his took a bit of damage over the course of the day and meant that it was not quite the right shape, which is why he was struggling, and then he got counted out. So that does mean that we also got third for the antweights. So once again, these guys are sitting on even footing. Last time it was a first and a first, this time is a third and a third. You know what, I'll take that. I typically don't do very well at these things, so getting trophies of any kind is just great for me. So yeah, 2/3 from this event, which I'm pretty happy about, I gotta say. We've got a few small changes we need to make to This Is a Party. We need to get this this motor swapped out for an actual proper, good, working, decent motor. I'm pretty happy with the way the carbon fiber motor mount worked though. This is actually just an arm off of a drone that I've cut down and epoxied into the chassis. That worked really, really well. So we're going to keep that and we're going to literally just swap this motor out and put it back in, I reckon, because everything else seemed to work pretty well there. And with the better motor, we're going to have a better chance in the next month's meet at actually going again and trying to get that first place trophy. Yeah, so I think that is going to be all for this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.